The total cost is $3.3 billion, which is an 80% decrease from the $16.5 billion that was in the appropriations bills 2 years ago. In our view, our appearance here today also means that the congressional moratorium on earmarks has been violated. There's always been a difference in definition, and in our view, some of them do appear to have violated the moratorium. But we're not here to quibble over a definition. We're here to point out that we have made all this progress thanks to the members here today, taxpayers, members of CAGW, and certainly a changed attitude on both sides of the aisle on Capitol Hill. It is not clear who asked for these earmarks or who might be making phone calls to various agencies after the bills have been adopted and the money is sitting there to ask them to send a particular project to a state or district. It's not a coincidence that all of the programs in the 2012 Congressional Pig Book correspond to past earmarks. In addition, in November 2011, President Obama reiterated that agencies should release the letters from members and all contacts that direct agency staff to fund particular projects. As usual, the Department of Defense was the repository of the vast majority of earmarks, 61% in defense, $2 billion out of the $3.3 billion total. And the Senate was once again the source of far more earmarks than the House. Out of the earmarks that could be identified as coming from the House or Senate, 77% of them originated in the Senate. One of the longest-running earmarks, which this year received $5.9 million, is the East-West Center in Hawaii. The center has received 10 earmarks worth $103.8 million since 2001. Since 1997. It's been around longer. All added by Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Daniel Inouye. And the senator admitted in 2007 that the project was created over the objections of the State Department and without any hearings. Because a moratorium is only temporary, Senator Pat Toomey and Representative Jeff Flake, both of whom are here today, have introduced the Bipartisan Earmark Elimination Act, which would establish a permanent ban on earmarks. The effort to permanently ban earmarks is essential. Many members of Congress, including Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Daniel Inouye, a number of Republicans, including CAGW's Porker of the Month, Mike Rogers, a Republican of Alabama, have been clamoring for the restoration of earmarks. Representative Rogers said earmarks are required in order to pass legislation, referring mostly to the transportation bill, which has had trouble reaching the House floor, not because of a lack of earmarks, but because it is simply too expensive. As in previous years, all of the items in CAGW's 2012 Congressional Pig Book meet our 7-point criteria, which was established in 1991 in conjunction with the bipartisan Congressional Porkbusters Coalition. The item must be requested by only the House or Senate, not authorized, not competitively awarded, not requested by the President, greatly exceeding the President's budget request or the previous year's funding, not been the subject of hearings, or serves only a local or special interest. And again, in the 2012 Congressional Pig Book, all of the earmarks have appeared in prior years. That means that since 1991, CAGW has identified 110,129 earmarks worth a total of $311 billion. And we'd like that to be the final number pending the approval of these efforts to permanently ban earmarks.
If you think we are out of the woods because of the reductions in earmark spending, look at the vote in the United States Senate that Tom just referred to, 40 to 59. 59 members of the United States Senate still would like to see the earmarks come back. It's not easy when a constituent or an important part of your state's economy comes to you and says, we just need this small amount of additional money, and if you'll just write a letter or if you'll just insert it in the appropriations bill, then we will be able to create jobs, da-da-da-da-da-da. So it takes some courage to stand up, and I'm happy to see that so many of my colleagues have followed their lead. But the fact is that there's already conversations about, well, we can't pass a highway bill because we haven't got enough earmarks in them. Isn't that a damning indictment of the mindset of members of Congress, that we can't pass a bill unless we pay people off? I just want to mention one area that still goes on of earmarks, and that obviously is the defense authorization and appropriations bills. There are earmarks in the authorization bill as well as the appropriations bill. And why is it that I worry about that? Because obviously, as Tom mentioned, it's the Willie Sutton syndrome. When they asked him why he robbed banks, he said, because that's where the money is. Well, the money is in the defense appropriations bills as well. And a great example of that is $120 million for 3 earmarks of $40 million each for, quote, alternative energy research. Alternative energy research. We're talking about cutting the Army by 100,000 people, the Marines by 80,000 people, and yet we're now have our armed services in the business of advanced alternative energy research. The Navy has led the parade. They spent in excess of $400 per gallon for about 20,000 gallons of algae-based biofuel. The role of the Armed Forces of the United States is not to engage in energy research. The job of energy research should be in the Energy Department, not taking it out of Defense Department funds. So, Tom, thanks. I'm not sure how many of the 21 years that you have been doing this I've been able to attend, but I think most of them. I thank my colleagues, and I want to, again, reiterate, Tom, your reward for this work will be in heaven, not here on earth. Thank you very much.
We had also been told for years that earmarks had nothing to do with passing big over-budget bills. But as soon as they were suspended, suddenly these big bills have more difficulty going through. And as John said, they've been used for years, and we all knew it, to bribe, to sweeten, to get bills through. And we find that a lot of the bipartisanship here in Washington is really all about spending. And as long as we can spend money, Republicans and Democrats work together if we can hand out the candy. We've stopped that temporarily, but Tom, you know, they're going to try in the next probably few weeks to redefine what an earmark is. We know over half of the Senate and probably over half of the House wants to bring back earmarks. So unless all of the American people continue to be engaged, and make no mistake, the only reason earmarks were banned temporarily is because Americans found out about it, particularly through Citizens Against Government Waste. They were against it, and candidates in the last cycle ran for banning earmarks. And when they came in, they voted that way. We got rid of them. But now they've all been in Washington for a while. It's going to be just a little bit harder to keep it that way.
I think it's fair to say that seldom do we have this much progress on such a challenging issue in Washington as we've had in dramatically reducing the volume and the cost of earmarks. 98% reduction is really serious progress, and I think we ought to celebrate that. But of course, the previous speakers are exactly right. That celebration can't allow us to overlook the fact that our work is not done. The legislation that I've drafted would accomplish that by allowing any individual senator to go down to the Senate floor and offer a point of order against a particular earmark in any given bill. It wouldn't take down the whole bill. It would allow him or her to strike the offending earmark. And it would require a 2/3 vote by the Senate to override that earmark. This is the kind of thing that I think will require multiple votes. It's going to require input from constituents. The American people are overwhelmingly, massively with us on this. They understand what a terrible process earmarking is and how it leads to other very bad outcomes. So I think if we stay at this, Tom, and thanks largely to your leadership, I think we're going to go from 98% success to 100% success and make it permanent, and I'm going to stay in that fight. Thanks very much.
Over the years, it's been an interesting process. I think on the House floor, I've challenged several hundred individual earmarks. And do you know how many of those votes we won, actually outright on the floor? One. Just one. Just one. It was a Republican earmark, and the other party hated that Republican more than they loved their earmarks, I guess, on this one. And so it actually went down. But a funny thing happened. It started happening, though. Members would actually find out which earmarks were being challenged, and they would rush to the floor to beat us there, and so they could withdraw their earmark rather than defend it. And then my personal favorite, where I kind of knew that this process was going to come crashing down, is I had challenged previously the earmark for the Punxsutawney Weather Museum in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And the sponsor of that earmark thought, well, we'll show them, we're going to show them how vital this earmark is. And so the mayor of Punxsutawney came with his top hat and his rodent, Phil, and had a press conference. And at the appropriate time, they pulled Phil out from behind the podium just like the stump. And unfortunately, Phil's bladder problem made it possible, and they had to go back pretty quickly. But I thought, what a spectacle. And if people didn't know how out of control this process was, they certainly knew it then. We control the power of the purse, and where the earmarkers pretend that that means we have the ability and should have the constitutional right to earmark, what it means is that we should provide oversight on how the federal agencies spend money. If we don't think they're spending it correctly, we rein them in. We establish the parameters in which money is spent. It doesn't mean that we look and see their abuses and pile on spending abuses of our own. And that's what the earmarking process came to be.
One program that's driving me crazy, and it's driving the American taxpayers crazy, and Senator McCain referenced this relative to alternative energy forms. What's going on right now in the Department of Energy is unbelievable. In this loan guarantee program, 27 companies got your tax dollars. 23 of those companies had ratings of BB- from Fitch and Standard & Poor's, which is another way of saying they were junk rated. No private money would go there, and yet it was okay to put American taxpayer dollars into these organizations.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks so much for the incredible work that CAGW has done over the last 21 years to make this book small. I remember when I was in the state Senate, this book was a different shape, but it was also a whole lot thicker. And if you look at these charts over here, you'll see that this is the least number of earmarks that have been put forward in Congress where we've had a press conference to celebrate. And so we ought to be celebrating for a very short period of time the decrease in number and the smallness of the book. But public policy is a process, which doesn't mean it has to stay down there. So the work of CAGW and the incredible work of my colleagues in the House and those who are supportive in the Senate, and the American people who are demanding accountability and transparency when it comes to spending, and are demanding that we not load up larger pieces of legislation so that they can get passed, as other individuals have referenced this morning. So I'm pleased to be back at this press conference. Tom, I look forward to coming back next year to have a flat line on these charts to the left. Thank you.
I want to remind you about former U.S. Senator Everett Dirksen one time said, when he feels the heat, he sees the light. There are many members of the Senate and the House that need to feel the heat and see the light. There's some of those people that need to see the door. These earmarking processes have caused more people to go to jail than anything else. And I congratulate Citizens Against Government Waste in their fight to end this earmarking process. And let's go back to constitutional limited government. And Tom, it's going to be the American citizens demanding constitutional limited government, as our founding fathers meant it, for us to shrink the size of government, for us to go forward so that we are financially viable as a country.